Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and today we are talking, guess what, Battle for Azeroth, and in particular, allied races, the 6 new race types that will be available to players in the new expansion, and what is probably the single biggest selling point of 8.0 so far. And yes, that means even more than Bondage Jaina, more than Banshee Sylvanas, even more than Warfronts, if you can believe that. Yes, I am even more hype about allied races right now than I am about Warfronts, and believe me, that's saying something, because I am so hype about Warfronts. Hey, what's your favourite thing about Warfronts? Mine is that even though they've been explained to me by about 10 different devs, I still don't really understand what they are or how they work. Yes, allied races are even more hype than that, and it's easy to see why, because frankly, who wouldn't want the chance to finally play as a Darkiron Dwarf or get the Horn as a Highmountain Tauren? It's fair to say that Blizzard have played a blinder with allied races, and not just in the unprecedented amount of new character choices that will give the players, but also in the way they are enabled. Instead of being handed to players at the start of the expansion, each allied race is unlocked by max level players upon completing a unique quest chain. And the genius of this system is, it negates the need for Blizzard to create entirely new starting areas from scratch every time they want to add a new race, as allied characters will begin the game at level 20. And this is where it starts getting exciting, okay? Because if they don't need to create a new starting area every time, Blizzard are basically free to add even more new allied races whenever they feel like it. They've already hinted that they'll be adding more throughout the expansion, and if the Battle for Azeroth hype train ever starts slowing down, then I wouldn't be at all surprised to see them add even more before the expansion is launched. So the question is, what other new allied races are we likely to see? Well, an important thing to bear in mind is that the template so far seems to be existing races, but with something added. So they're Dranei, but you know, they're Lightforged. Or they're Trolls, but they've learned how to stand up straight, that sort of thing. So it's unlikely that we'll see entirely unique races added in this way. That means no Naga, no Tuskar, and no, not even any Vulpera. Not that you'd want to play as Vulpera anyway, because look, these guys are clearly baddies. Look into those cold, lifeless eyes and tell me that this isn't the face of pure evil, seriously. So join us as we look at what other new allied races we might see become playable in World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth. Okay, go, 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 go. When talking about allied races, or sub-races they used to be known in the olden days of the week before last, some choices, such as Darkiron Dwarves and Zandalar Trolls, seemed obvious. We predicted them ourselves in a video, but we'd always hit problems when it came to guessing what human variants could be added. That problem seems to have been solved with the introduction of the new Kul'tiras human models, who appear to have been added to the game specifically with a future human allied race in mind. That, and all of the cakes in mind too, because this, ladies and gentlemen, is what happens when you leave humans on a South Seas island for generations with nothing but giant sea monsters and Jaina's mum for company. They eat all the cakes and they become totally awesome looking. Kul'tiran humans are bigger, hardier, and more gloriously moustached than their weedier playable cousins, and lore-wise it makes perfect sense for them to join up with the Alliance. We're going to help them sort out their pirate problem next expansion, so they owe us. And if Battle for Azeroth heads down the expected path of more water-based Ashara and old god fighting action later on, then who else are you going to want alongside you in battle than a people whose special skill is actual sea monster hunting and who actually even look like Ursula for good measure? Well, I mean Tuskars obviously, but Blizz seem determined to shit on that particular dream, so Kul'tiran humans are the next best thing, and to me it seems inevitable that we will see them made playable before the expansion is out. So we rate the likelihood of Kul'tiras humans being added to the allied race roster as 10 Jaina's mums out of 10. Don't forget the cake. In Battle for Azeroth, we've been promised orc models that can stand up straight, like Thrall, which has got the player base more excited than Bill Cosby at an unattended drinks cabinet. My opinion, though, is that Thrall has always looked a bit silly with his long, straight back, and that the orc models, as they are pretty awesome. So what would really excite me is if we went back to Draenor. No, wait, bear with me on this one, okay? Okay, so I think we should go back to Draenor one last time, and no, look, wait, listen, this is a good one, I promise, because like it or not, alternative timeline Draenor does still exist, and it's just chock full of orcs, uncorrupted by the Fel, and sporting a fantastic variety of non-green skin colours. And you know, they did say they'd lend us a hand whenever we wanted, remember? Okay, so the biggest demon invasion in Azeroth history in the final battle against Sargeras obviously was not reason enough to ask them for their help, but I think we can all agree that fighting blood trolls and zombie dinosaurs on Zandalar definitely would be, so come on Thrall, send out the call. The models all exist in abundance in-game already, and are essentially just recolours anyway, so they would be super easy to add as a playable race. And honestly, is there an orc player anywhere who wouldn't jump at the chance to change from this to this? It's true, uncorrupted orcs really have zero connection or relevance to the story being told in Battle for Azeroth, but for sheer crowd-pleasing, slam-dunk awesomeness, there are very few better choices Blizzard could make. We rate the possibility of uncorrupted orcs at savage out of 10. Night Elves were the original Worgen, and the only other race in lore alongside humans who are capable of contracting the curse. So if you're looking for a wolfy variant for an allied race, Night Elves seems an obvious choice, especially in Battle for Azeroth, because you see that big massive burning tree? Yeah, that's where the Night Elves used to live. So in 8.0, the whole race is looking for a new place in the Eastern Kingdoms to call their home. And call me crazy, but does this sound to you like the perfect opportunity to phase Gilneas into a proper real-life Alliance city? The Night Elves did them a solid when they lent their healing powers to the recapture of Gilneas during the Cataclysm. Giving the new refugees a wing of the town to call their own seems like the very least that Gen could do in return. Okay, so Gilneas citizens have some serious Dick Van Dyke accent problems, and the local cinema only shows Tim Burton movies on repeat. But beggars can't be choosers, and when your hometown has been turned into the world's biggest tiki torch, you take what you can get, you know? And with the imminent attack on Lordaeron on the horizon, the Alliance could do a lot worse than have the Night Elf forces stationed in such a handy strategic base. So as a concept, it makes perfect sense. I see one major problem with this idea though. Creating a Night Elf Worgen form wouldn't take too much effort, especially as we've been promised updated Worgen models next expansion anyway, but revamping Gilneas is a much bigger job. And for that reason, we are only rating the possibility of Night Elf Worgen at 4 weirdly jaundiced female Worgen faces out of 8. And if Worgen can get new elf variants, why can't we do the same for Forsaken? In lore, all Forsaken are either human or elf, but so far we've only ever had the chance to play as the human version. And this makes sense, honestly. When we start out as a new level 1, the undead starting zone tells an explicitly human story. But now that starting zones are no longer an issue for allied races, is it time that Horde players finally got their hands on Dark Rangers? Oh, by the way, that groaning sound that you can hear is the entirety of the Horde player base orgasming as one, because I just mentioned Dark Rangers, one of the most longed for races in the history of the game. They would be more popular than John Travolta at a plastic surgeon's office and would raise hype levels to a ridiculous high. Oh, what's that? You're not bothered about playing a Dark Ranger? Are you sure? It'd be especially cool if Blizzard had time to add some extra undead features to them too, so they aren't just essentially clammy looking blood elves, but their own distinct race. And if Blizzard don't fancy going full on Dark Ranger, because let's be honest, they're a tiny bit void elfy really, aren't they? Why not just some common or garden night elves who have just happened to be undead? It's fine lore wise and would be a neat little extra option for undead players. All in all though, I see Forsaken elves as being not quite distinct enough in their own right to get the allied race treatment, and I'd imagine we are much less likely to see them than Night Elf Worgen, so they get a far-fetched 2 Dark Rangers out of Sylvanas. One way or another, it's a fair guess that we are going to be seeing plenty of Gilgoblins, or Gilblins, in Battle for Azeroth. They were created by Hobart Grapplehammer, a goblin tinkerer and quest giver in Kazan, which will be appearing as a dungeon next expansion. And if we do indeed take the fight to Ashara, then these little amphibious chaps are almost certain to make an appearance. But will they be purely as NPCs for us to slaughter, or might they provide the basis for a new allied race? Okay, so on the face of it, Gilgoblins don't seem like they'd be an especially valuable asset to the Horde forces, their main characteristics being that they are just like normal goblins, but more stupid and more greedy. But they look cool, and let's face it, that's essentially enough for an allied race, and they do have one major asset that is totally expansion appropriate: these gills. Yes, these scaly dudes can breathe underwater, which you'd imagine might come in pretty handy when it comes to exploring islands, or later on battling Queen Ashara and the Old Gods. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned Old Gods, as it does raise one major problem with Gilgoblins as an allied race. It's not entirely clear where their allegiances lie. When you fight them in Azuna, they'll often give voice lines referring to the Great Kraken. Most people predict that the story for Battle for Azeroth is eventually going to find its way to the old god N'Zoth, and most people think that N'Zoth looks like, yeah, you get the idea. Even if most of the Gilblins do turn out to be under the influence of the big bad though, that's not to say that a splinter group won't see the error of their ways and lend the Horde a scaly hand in the battle for Azeroth. So we're rating the possibility of Gilgoblins a solid 3 fins out of Naga. I'll admit, I'm only really adding these to the list because I didn't want gnomes to feel left out, and there's only so many possible options when it comes to these little fellas, but the leper gnomes are certainly an option, I guess. I mean, they exist anyway, they definitely exist. And they look cool too, I guess, though would you really pick one as your actual character though? Allegiance-wise, they'd actually be a Horde race, as some have already sworn fealty to Sylvanas and the Forsaken. Having said that, Blood Elves appear to keep leper gnomes slaves in Silvermoon, which could be a bit awkward. Overall, I think it's really unlikely that we'll see leper gnomes as a playable allied race, and I'd rate them a sickly 2 boils out of green, even though there is a part of me that really wants to see it happen. If only because the idea of Gnome Regan finally becoming an actual faction city, but for the Horde, is just too delicious not to think about. I mean, seriously, can you imagine? But that is not to say that I don't think there'll be any dinky green playable races at all, because, and bear with me here, what if... yes, I know. I said at the beginning of this video that I was only considering allied races that were, at heart, a variant on an already existing playable race, and Murlocs may be plenty of things, but they are certainly not that. And also, look at them. They're tiny, they're frail, they're more annoying than this sentence. There's absolutely no way that they would be an allied race. But then I think Blizzard haven't specifically said that allied races have to be based on existing playable races, have they? And then I think Blizzard have said on numerous occasions that we were at one point incredibly close to getting playable Murlocs, haven't they? And then I think in an island exploring type expansion, Murlocs and their specifically amphibious skill set would certainly be an asset to whichever faction they get recruited by, wouldn't they? And then I think we have already spent a fair amount of time in Legion mind melding with Murky and sending him on his path to becoming Crown Prince of the Murlocs or whatever and uniting his people. Might he want to show his appreciation by rallying his forces under our banner in the Battle for Azeroth? And then I think, really, is there any other race Blizzard could possibly add that would guarantee them more hard, fast, dirty cash money than playable Murlocs? And then I think Blizzard really like money. And then I think maybe playable Murlocs aren't such a stupid idea after all, you know? Okay, so if you've played as Murky in Highmountain, then you already know that he controls worse than Captain Hook's Joy-Cons, but that could easily be solved with a bit of TLC. And yes, it's true, Murlocs don't really talk, but honestly, if sub numbers drop during the pre-expansion lull and Blizzard need to pull the what we'll call an Ashbringer to get people hyped for the Battle of Azeroth all over again, then they might not even have a choice in the matter. It will be Murloc or bust. And as such, we give the possibility of playable Murlocs an ambitious 4 Murloc Knights out of Murky. And don't sit there all disapproving, because even if you think it's a stupid idea, and I admit it is a stupid idea, if you could, you'd play a Murloc. You know it, I know it, there would not be a player in this game who wouldn't have a Murloc all tucked away secretly on some server somewhere. Silvermoon probably, they totally go for that sort of thing on Silvermoon. What do you think, guys? How long do you think it will be before we see even more allied races added to the game, and what do you think they'll be? Let us know in the comments below. And thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed this video, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real life money to keep them coming. You lot really are the best. If you didn't like it though, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Kronosh. You know, my name is Taliesin from me and Evitel. Until next time, cheerio.